All right, we're back. Another table reading today of New York's 230-page document. This is kind of our questions that we're compiling to the OCM of sections that we're kind of trying to concern ourselves with. So it's not the most thrilling podcast that we're ever going to do, but it is important. And these are some of the questions that we have that we're trying to make sense of it or have definitions. We want to close loopholes and gray areas so it's really transparent. We all know what we're doing here.
Yeah. And I think this is insider's view to what people in the cannabis industry spend a lot of time on. We spend a considerable amount of time talking about these regulations and parsing the regulations and trying to figure them out. It's a big part of our job. And so, for those that may not be super interested, it actually gives you some insight into, what cannabis companies go through, not just in New York State, but, states all across the country have similar type regulations.
And each one is different. So it's not like you can across the board take parallels between each and every other state.
No, not even close.
Because what's the total? What is it? It's up to 230. We're looking at these sections of 120.3-B. There's so many. Your book is, you've slimmed it down considerably.
Yeah, I'll hold it up here so people can see from the camera. This is a slimmed down version where I got rid of all the states, many spaces and double spacing, all that stuff. And it's still, I think my version comes in at 130 pages. So
technically, let's talk about that. Out of the 230 pages that was written by the state, we have 60 days to read this whole document and understand it as much as we possibly can for what they are describing. And so kind of that's what we're doing, right? We're kind of picking apart some of the things that we have questions about. What is the first, where do you want to start?
Let's start at, obviously cultivator, cultivation, that's the kind of license we're going to be going for. So I think that's where we're going to kind of spend most of our time talking here.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see here, 120.3B. So 120.3 is the license specific tiers and the options. So within this, just to give background to our readers or to our listeners out there, is there's two types of cultivation licenses in here. The first one is just to do one activity. That's outdoor, mixed light, which is really code word for greenhouse, and indoor. So one set of licenses, you can just pick one of those. Then there's a second option, which is a combination of outdoor and mixed light / greenhouse. And the question that we have that I'll ask you to talk about here in just a second is within this combination tier of doing some grow outdoors and some in a greenhouse, they have different tiers, 1 through 5, and each tier gets bigger, more square footage that you're allowed to grow as you go from tier 1 to tier 5. And it goes lockstep as your outdoor gets bigger, so does your allotment of greenhouse space.
Under the combination license.
Under this combination license.
Not single tier or single grow activity, whether it's outdoor, indoor, or mixed.
Yep, exactly. Now, within each tier, there are mins and maxes of the amount of square footage that you can grow. Is you've got to hit a min. And obviously, the bigger you go, the opportunity to grow more and sell more and wholesale more and make more products becomes more important. But, the question that we're asking is it correct to assume that any farm that wants to do this combination license, as they are able to do more outdoors, they can do more in their greenhouse? Should they go lockstep, or are there farms out there that have a lot of outdoor space, but only a little bit of greenhouse space? I don't know. What are your take on that? Should it be lockstep or should they be independent?
Realistically, I think they should be independent of that. I mean, because everyone's setup could be different. But as a farmer, you want to maximize what you possibly can. Can we maximize this tier based on what we currently have?
Well, I mean, we can probably max out tier 1, tier 2, probably partly into tier 3. But I think the question in my head is just from a cost perspective. You may have 20, 30 acres sitting there, and in a tier 5 combination license, you can do, let's see here, up to 100,000 square feet of outdoor, which for those that know is roughly 2.2 acres. But you'd also have to do 15,000 to 30,000 square feet of mixed light or greenhouse. Well, what if you don't have that much? We're fully aware of how much it costs to put in a nice higher end mixed light, potentially even light depth greenhouse. It's a huge cost to it. So you may have a small one there that you could use. It maybe is only 3,000 or 6,000 square feet, but you got plenty of outdoor. Why are they making it so that both have to go up? Why couldn't you be, a tier 1 greenhouse combination, but a tier 5 outdoor, let's just say?
That I see what you're saying. Because then it gives you more flexibility. So versus, individual section there.
Yep.
But that'd be quite the change.
It would be quite the change to the regs. But because you pay by the square foot.
That's another good question.
Does it really matter? Hey, this is what my farm is capable of. I can be, maybe I have more greenhouse space than I have outdoor.
Right.
Hey, let me do a small amount of outdoor, but a bigger greenhouse.
Right.
Because that min is there. In a case where you just don't have a lot of outdoor space, but you have the greenhouse space, you are basically forced into doing just the single license of just the greenhouse because you can't meet the min
of the
combination tier that the amount of greenhouse space you have. So, once again, I think it's not a true assumption here for those that want to do this combination cultivator license that as your outdoor or greenhouse space goes up, your outdoor or greenhouse space on the other side goes up. I think it can be quite different for everybody. And I think there should be a little bit more flexibility of mixing and matching some of these tiers on the combination license.
Which kind of goes down to your later question about the min-max size requirements. Realistically, you want to be the top tier or the max in any tier.
100% you want to be the max in every tier because as the tiers go up in sizes, the cost per square foot that the state's going to charge you goes up in sizes. And in those cases where you're, if you did the minimum, you're a tier 4 and you do the minimum. Well, the minimum is basically the max of tier 3.
Right.
And your cost per square foot is dramatically different if you're in the tier 3 than you're in the tier 4. So you really always want to be at as close to the max on each one as possible. Which, once again, question I have is, can you be if you're in a combination license, can you be, the max on the outdoor limit, but the min on, the greenhouse? How much flexibility, within that tier and your square footage, will you have?
Yeah. So you'd rather be the min at a tier below. And then we don't know, okay, so what's the transition like? Because really you want to move the quickest you could if you wanted to expand into the max zone.
Yep.
Because you're going to be paying a higher fee. So,
which, as we talked about this morning, you pay every 2 years because you have to reapply for your license every 2 years, and then you've got to pay that fee every 2 years.
And so maybe we're jumping ahead, but let's dive into that more, because at 6 months prior to you re-upping your license again, we have to provide information on how much you're selling and how much stock you have left over, correct? And basically you can get moved down if that goal isn't met, correct?
All right. So here's what it says. At the time of license renewal, cultivators shall, meaning must, provide inventory and production records requested by the office, meaning OCM, during the 6 months prior to the application for renewal. As part of the license renewal process, the board will reduce a cultivator's maximum cultivation canopy to a lower tier. The cultivator sold less than 50% of what is harvested in the previous 6 months. So you're correct. Within 6 months of reapplying for your license, you have to show them that you can handle your growing and selling that much product, which actually is somewhat of an ingenious system for the state as a way to regulate without having to do a lot of work.
How much supply is going to be?
Yeah, how much supply is needed. If you've got farms that aren't selling 50% of at least 50% of their product and having to destroy 50%, or it's just sitting around, boom, drop them down a tier. Boom, you've just cut a whole bunch of supply off from the market, which should
reduce your fees.
To you, the individual, reduce your fees, but to all of the other farmers, now that's less supply. And in a supply and demand pricing world, that should help keep prices from going to the bottom. Now, that's if the state, and the OCM actually follows through and is pretty hardcore about, did you sell your products? Oh, you didn't? Boom, drop down. And frankly, it may even be the opposite too, where they're coming to people that are selling 100% of their product and saying, hey, move up. We're bumping you up a tier
right
here.
Does that open up like fire sales on 6 months ahead of that license renewal?
There's a lot to be decoded in this one sentence.
That's our question.
There's a lot to unpack. And I think this is part of our issue with a lot of these license or these draft regulations is they are so detailed,
but
except where they're not.
Yeah.
And because they're so detailed, we have the expectation now that the answer is going to be detailed in the regs. And so when you find places that are really kind of left open for interpretation, you do sort of get paralyzed. But I think your point of, within 6 months of having to renew your license, like, is it like, hey, sell everything, get it out of here. I don't care what price you sell it out. Like, I don't want to drop a tier. Get rid of it. And you may have games and stuff played like that, which can, of course, hurt the market, whipsawing prices back and forth, which doesn't really do anything for anybody. So how they're actually going to calculate this to take into account fireside sales, I don't know. Really what I would assume has happened is if one person is, selling it, well, let's just take a step back. Let's just say there's too much supply for the amount of demand. And for us, we can't hit 50% of mark. So we just fire sale and get rid of the half so we can stay in our tier. What'll happen is some other farmer won't be able to sell even at a fire sale because there's just not the demand for it. So some other farmer's going to
someone's going to get hosed
with it. Somebody eventually is going to be, but I do think it's an interesting mechanism that they put in it. And frankly, I think it's one of the more ingenious ones to really help keep supply and demand in check. And once again, if they find everybody's at 100%, hey, let's open up the cultivation licenses again. Let's bring in more people who want, okay, we brought in 20 more. Okay, let's cut it off. Let's wait another year and let's just see how, much sales is doing. Are we dropping down more licenses or are we having people bump up against their license?
Well,
max size.
That's a great question too, because even though, let's say a new contender comes in, some guy leaves, a new person comes in. It's kind of up to their marketing and how they push the material that will determine their sales in a sense.
So do you want, I'd like to keep going on this min and max principle, because I think this is where I have one of my biggest questions here is it's pretty simple. What the hell do you mean by min and max canopy size? So for those that aren't,
is a time scale.
Well, it's a whole bunch of things, but just quickly for those listening that don't know what we're talking about when it comes to canopy size, it's how the OCM regulates how big we can get is by how much canopy can you grow. So this summer or this past summer when we grew under our conditional license, we could grow, 43,000 square feet, really an acre. And they're basically taking when those plants grow up, how much canopy,
the space
from left to right, north, south, east, west, does that take? And, let's just say it's, a 2x2 square that the canopy of that flower, that's 4 square feet that plant goes in. So they're telling us under each one of these tiers that we can have a min canopy size and max, meaning we have to grow within
that space,
that min and max space. Great. Understand. The problem I have is, well, what does it mean to grow between min and max? Now let's just think about growing outdoors, right? When do we do seed starts outdoors?
I mean, we start them early May to go in out early June.
Yep. So they get planted in the field early June. And then when do we pull them out?
End of September, early October.
Early October. And then we don't grow anymore until the next May. And so you really, for outdoors, pretty easy. You have one growing season. Did you grow between your min and max canopy size during that one season? Easy to understand. What gets more complicated, because they don't detail it out, is a greenhouse or indoor situation where you could be growing year round. So, let's just take a tier 3 combination license. So you can grow between 12,500 square feet and 25,000 square feet of outdoor. Once again, easy to calculate that. But for your mixed light or greenhouse, it's between 60 to 50 square feet, but not to exceed 12,500 square feet. Well, is that doing it once a year? Is that just one cycle of your greenhouse has to be between that?
Yeah.
Is that
every cycle?
Yeah, you need to be growing year round at that level. Is it one cycle? Is it year round? Is it cumulative? So let's just say,
right. A total throughout the whole year collectively.
Yep. So let's just say we had we go for 10,000 square feet of greenhouse, but it's cumulative. And we do 5 cycles a year. Does that mean it's only 2,000 square feet per cycle to equal 10,000, total by the end of the year? These are really, really important questions.
So what was that? What was the tier we were talking about? The 3?
Tier 3 is between 6,250 and 12,500 square feet.
Indoor.
No, mixed light.
Mixed light.
Mixed
so
light,
greenhouse, let's say 4-season greenhouse.
Yep.
So if you times that by, let's say, 4 cycles in a year.
So like
what does that
you're
equal?
At the min, you're at like 24,000 square feet.
Which is over the outdoor, isn't it?
It's almost equal. Yeah, it'd be almost equal. 25,000 square feet of outdoor. So, but that 6,250, which is the min, is that just cumulative through the year, or is that each cycle at any one time? You can only have 6,250
or up to the whole year.
Yeah, and what happens when you're at zero?
Drastic implications.
Yeah, and we've got greenhouses that aren't great in the summer because of the cooling, and we could put in perfectly nice greenhouses, but are very much a 1 to 2 season.
Yeah,
grow
3 season, maybe early
3
spring.
season.
Yeah,
exactly. You know, how are those calculated? So honestly, I think that's arguably one of the biggest issues I have so far with these regulations that nobody's really given me a good answer for, and I don't see a lot of people talking about, but it's what I'm most interested to hear back.
Because it has big implications, especially on the min-max. And if you're trying to build out something for the future here, it's hard to take what we've been given and then go make an order of something.
Yeah. Because, I mean, let's just talk about it from a cost perspective. How long, well, time and cost, how long should we be budgeting if we wanted to put in a new greenhouse?
Yeah.
6 months?
Right.
At probably a minimum.
Yeah.
You know, getting the steel ordered and getting all this stuff built and ready and then get it in and getting foundation poured. You're at like a 6-month minimum lead time to get your greenhouse, at least just the shell ready. That's not including buying the lights, getting the tables, getting the soil done.
And post-COVID, supply chains are fractured as they are.
Yep.
Everything's double what you expect to get it.
But if you're somebody like us, right, that wanted to do, let's just say, a tier 5 combination license, which could do up to 100,000 square feet of outdoor, which we're perfectly capable of doing here, it's only 2 acres.
Right.
But that means we'd have to go from, how big of our total greenhouses today?
Not big enough. Yeah,
62?
we'll double them. Yep, 62.
We'd have to be at least 15,000 square feet minimum, or maximum 30,000 square feet of mixed light. You know, we're talking adding, 2 to 8 more greenhouses at 6 months at a pretty hefty cost per each. When do you decide to make that investment where you're like, oh, well, it's the min and max. Yeah, let's put in a couple more greenhouses. And then the state comes out and says, no, that's cumulative.
Yeah.
Throughout the year. All of a sudden, you're 30,000 square feet of greenhouse space. You're 4 or 5 times over.
Yeah.
You're now only running 1 cycle.
Yep.
In those greenhouses. Complete waste of money you just spent to get 1 cycle out of it.
Yeah.
And I think this has been, your biggest challenge is, when do we make investments when there's still so much? And what we think is the obvious answer, it's usually the opposite.
Right.
We found that we take the opposite of what we think it is, and that's what the answer should be. Yeah.
Before this, we were talking about, there was a metric between indoor cultivation and outdoor. You remember that? We were talking. So this was in the provisional, what they were trying to equate it to. So there was like a formula based on. Do you remember this? It's probably not per se in this, but there was like, it was like a 10 to 1. So whatever one plant that you had indoors, it was like you could do 10 outdoors or something, I think right?
That's what Canny had, I think, proposed to the OCM as what should be the marker, maybe 5,000 square feet of greenhouse, and then a 10 to 1, you could do that outdoors.
Yeah, because let's say in our situation, that would be almost kind of nice, because let's say you could only do so much greenhouse, right? And I didn't want to make the investment to go crazy into more. where we could just be fine with that, but we could do more outdoor,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that would really fit for the farm without having to spur more infrastructure build out. But I do know that's where New York's going to get a lot of benefit from this.
Mm-hmm.
My hope is that it's not this licensing tiers aren't being used as ammo to get infrastructure build out, then to pull back on that.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest fear for people, because this industry, as we've known, because we're also regular food farmers, we tell people that we grow tomatoes and not cannabis, because there's a 4 to 8x, 10x cost associated with just being in the cannabis.
We laugh. We say everything starts at 20 grand, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
20 grand.
20 grand. And we look at our bucker, which we make this comparison a lot to, versus our shock freezer, which does 20 different things and we can use it every day, is the same cost as our bucking machine that does one thing only.
Yeah. And it's super simple.
And it's so simple, but the cost associated with it is insane for what it does. You know, that's my biggest worry is, you know, hey, we're going to spend the money to build infrastructure here.
Yep.
And long term, but it's got to be smart. It can't be just thrown together just to get that infrastructure build out investment out of cannabis people in building infrastructure here. And then my biggest worry is then you get downsized.
Yeah.
And you've overbuilt.
Mm-hmm.
So really complex, and that's what we need clarification on.
Well, I'd like to stick with the canopy discussion.
Sure.
Then I want to go into the nursery license because I got a couple things there for you to comment on. But let's just talk canopy in general, of how do they actually calculate how much canopy do you have? And as you know, for those that are listening, as I said, it's basically, you know, how big is the plant? And you real time have to sort of calculate, all right, well, here's how much space do we think it's taking up? And so here's kind of the definition. You know, it is when it's in the vegetative or flowering stage. So not the small little seedlings.
Yep.
Basically like a foot and above is when they consider it being in the mature stage. But canopy may be non-contiguous, but each unique area included in the total canopy calculation shall be separated by an identifiable boundary, including but not limited to interior walls, shells, greenhouse walls, hoop house walls, garden benches, hedgerows, fencing, garden beds, or garden plots. Holy cow. Like, talk about a regulation or a point that can be interpreted so many different ways. I mean, a ridiculous number of ways. And each farmer is slightly different of how they put stuff in the ground and how they identify a boundary.
Yeah.
It seems crazy and a little arbitrary to me. And I've had this argument with a few people here, and I'll tell you what I think is the right way to do it, or the easier way.
Right.
Just say easier way is, I think the state should tell us how many plants you can grow.
Okay.
Say, you know, come out and say,
hey, a total, is this, like, you can do that very easily with outdoor, right?
Sure. You could,
because it's a one cycle tip. I mean, you could play some other games with auto flowers and that's another thing we can get into.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about like just when they say a min square footage of 10,000 square feet. All right. Well, all right. OCM, you do the math.
Yeah. Let's
pick an average size photoperiod plant or an average size auto flowering plant in an outdoor situation is, you know, auto flowers maybe 4 square feet and the photoperiod is 9 square feet, right? Something fairly simple. And then just do the math. 10,000 square feet divided by X square footage per plant. That's how many plants I can have. And so when the OCM comes out, they don't have, I mean, when they come out, they bring tape measures.
Yeah.
they're taping and checking to see, well, wait a minute, you're over your canopy by X amount because you allotted 3 feet and it went 3.2 inches. Oh, for crying out loud. These plants grow on their own. Some are tiny, some are big. Just tell us how many plants.
Yeah, because in other states you would see if you were kept on numbers, like a total number, though, this is where you see people getting into, they grow monster plants because they could only have 12 of them, right? So now you're building a plant that's 12 feet in diameter.
Yep,
you know what I mean? To maximize your total canopy and what you can do. I mean, farmers, that's, if you apply this to like over to the USDA, that's all corn and soybean farmers give 2 shits about is their yields and how many bushels they get.
Yep.
And the more that they can maximize their field, the more they're like top farmer in the field. You know what I mean? Because why aren't we applying some of this the same as that?
But I mean, just give us a plant total. And with that unique mechanism of, are you selling 50% of your product? Hey, if you're growing monsters within your thing and you're getting twice the yield that somebody, a normal plant would get, but you can't sell it. Hey, you're going to get knocked down anyway. Knocked down here. Once again, I mean, some of this is there's just so many complicated points to this. And then they got in
it's in depth on a lot of it, but not full in depth.
Yeah. I mean, these regulations are going to need to be 1,000 pages long by the time they're done detailing out. What were we told? 8,000 comments that they're going to get on these regs.
Yeah.
Just simplify some of these things down. Just tell us, hey, you've got a tier 3, you can do 2,000 outdoor photos and you can do, 800 greenhouse photos.
Right.
Boom. Done. Easy. Now when the inspector comes out and just counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, show me your paperwork. Hey, you're allowed to have 1,000. Yep. All your paperwork matches up here. No taping, no measuring, no one person's better at, measuring and putting in boundaries, and the whole thing. Just as I said, they've overcomplicated in many areas beyond what is probably necessary in my book.
Well, I know you're no fan of government regulation. It's been documented on their other podcast of you saying this.
Yep.
And this is while other industry has this much government regulation, I'm not very few, right? If any, that has this insanity of
maybe the tobacco industry. I know gets a lot of regulatory stuff, but a lot of that is around the taxation side. Right. I have no clue, and maybe something we should look up for future conversation is, but do tobacco farmers have to tag
every tobacco plant that they grow and have seed to sale software that is connected to the state, showing where every one of those plants are in the cycle? When one needs to be destroyed, you're uploading pictures to destroy it, and you're sending in records of, maintenance records of everyone who's, turned a screw on any piece of equipment, and like the server warehouse that this is going to entail to house this data is going to be insane in itself. Yeah. The millions and millions of records that the state's going to get from all these regulations. Honestly, I think it's really there for the exceptions. When when you mess up, now they're going to dive deep into it. And I get that, but man, talk about the time load that it's taking us to they're punishing us all for the future bad act of a few that they need to punish, and they need all this documentation for. All right. You want to move on to nurseries? Yeah. All right. So we were talking before this, we kind of grouped a couple of our questions into nursery here. So
All right. So the first one, a nursery license. So for those, once again, that are listening, a nursery license is for those that are growing immature plants and then selling those immature plants, whether they came from seed, whether they came from a clone, to other cultivators.
You can't grow flowering unless it's for breeding. You must destroy that.
Yep. Well, so that's partly the first question is section 123.2, a nursery is prohibited from selling any cannabis plants in the flowering stage. Okay, well, flowering stage is not the vegetative stage. And if someone was doing mother plants, which is where clones come from, are those mother plants in the flowering stage when you're taking clone cuttings from them?
No.
Okay. So could a nursery become a mother house for people that want to do their own clones? I don't know.
You'd be able to buy your own clones for production.
Yeah, but what if I wanted to buy mother plants to start my own? Could I go to a nursery that's got the genetics that I want?
If you have a farm, if you have a nursery license, if you're a cultivator, right? So you'd have to have your nursery license to be able to.
Well, I'm saying we're a cultivator, but we're not a nursery.
Yep.
We don't have a nursery license. Can I go to a nursery license and say, hey, you've got great genetics here. We'd love to start a breeding program, at our place for doing clones. Can I buy a mother plant from you?
This is a good question. So if it's for our own purposes, I would imagine we as cultivators can have our own moms without having a nursery license.
We can.
It's only when you want to sell those that you would need a nursery license. But let's get into that, because here's the benefit. Under nursery license, if we had bought the moms and now we take clones, we could only grow those clones up to a foot before we need to
put them into canopy.
Yep. So the advantage to having a nursery that you could buy those clones up to 2 feet.
All right. Hold on.
Right.
So a nursery shall sell seeds, seedlings, clones, and immature cannabis plants or cannabis plants in the vegetative stage. There you go.
Yep.
Under 2 feet in height. So the question is if we have to move our immature seedlings before they're 1 foot in height into our canopy calculations, is there now a huge advantage to going to a nursery and buying plants from them at 2 feet in height?
So basically you buy them and then flip them right away as soon as you put them into the canopy. So you're buying yourself whatever it takes from 1 foot to 2 foot. Is it a month? Right?
Let's say at a month, by buying from nurseries, does that give you an extra cycle?
Yeah.
Or close to it, maybe an extra half a cycle.
Which would be bonus cycle, right?
A huge bonus cycle, which
minus the cost of buying the clones at that height, right? That might be a different
you may
fee, right? But it might be worth it to go that route because you're getting a whole extra cycle in.
Yeah, maybe way worth it. And I think this is when we sit on some of these calls that we're in where, groups of us are talking about the, these regulations, that's one that comes up quite a bit as a mistake by the OCM, that it should be 1 foot for cultivators when they have to move in canopy, and it should be 1 foot for the nursery people to sell it to you under 1 foot. I don't see it as a mistake. I see it as a huge advantage
to be a nursery license, right?
Yeah, because if we were just a cultivator and not a nursery license, we now have a huge advantage to go to another farmer and give them our business to do their clones for us versus us doing themselves, because we can get that extra half cycle it is, and the cost of the clones, obviously has to be the correct price, but we'd have a huge advantage, or we'd have a huge incentive to buy from somebody else versus doing it our own. And if that's what the OCM was thinking of, hey, how do we help out the nursery licenses and not give all the incentive to the cultivators just, to have their own little in-house nursery? Mm-hmm. It's actually a pretty genius move, I think.
But let me present this. So let's say we're already cultivators. What if we get a nursery license? Can now I buy my own 2-foot clones and bring them in there? Or is it right? How does it?
Once again, are we buying our own 2-foot clones from our own nursery license?
Wink, wink.
Yeah, wink, wink. Yeah, that's once again, this is where the regs are detailed, except when they're not. And this is one of those where, because you are allowed as a nursery license, you are allowed to have a cultivator's license and vice versa. Once again, there's a huge advantage if you're a cultivator and getting that nursery license so that you can bring in 2-foot plants under your canopy than your 1-foot plant that's out there. That you would if you just had a cultivation license.
But does it go back? Yeah. It's a mind F, you know what I'm saying?
Well, yes. And once again, we sort of chuckle at how long these regs are. They are not nearly long enough. I mean, it literally needs to be 1,000 pages with all of these little tiny, caveats, because they've gone the direction of being super detailed in what you can and can't do. And there's no one toe in, one toe out here. You either need to be detailed or you don't.
Yeah.
They've taken the route to be detailed. So we need them to add quite dramatically. And we, all the stuff that we're going to send in is basically stuff that we care about. We only had, I think 13 comments, that we're up to here.
And we're not covering a lot of the other 230 pages worth of stuff. So
not even touching it at this point. It's
I mean, we're also not trying to go crazy and stuff that we probably won't care about in the future, but these are big decisions that, whether or not we have like an emergency bill presented that changes something. This is, my assumption is that there'll be some changes enough to spur another 45-day comment period. But
there's no
guarantee.
There's no way that they can do this 60-day comment period
without changes.
With no changes.
Yeah, there's just no way.
Which they've done almost no changes on any of the other documents that have had to go in for the 60-day comment period. I think, and they did that for expediency.
Right, to kind of get this off. But my thing is, I don't want to go so fast because this doesn't necessarily jeopardize the rollout of the dispensaries of the cord, which has got its own issues between suits that are happening or not. But it's really affecting the overall licensing. Now, that's probably not going to happen anyway until probably, let's say, after this harvest of this year, where we'll see more. I think they said by the summer, we'll see these regulations be coming out. And then, it's going to take them probably the whole summer to go through all the applicants and then start opening it up. So that's not going to happen until about the fall anyway. It's just my take on it. I just don't see it happening any quicker than that. It'd be nice to be wrong every now and then, but just realistically, that's probably going to be the case. What other things in the nursery?
Let me see. What else do
we have questions, or does that cover it all?
I think we hit 2 feet in height.
And there was one was the last page here. No, well, we covered that.
Yep. I think we covered the nursery. I think we had one more area. And once again, this is just this is a really interesting one.
Which one are you on?
Number 8. So section 124.5, contracting limitations. This is one that, sort of at the end of the regs, sort of getting near the end, not really part of like the conditional or the cultivator or nursery section. It's sort of on its own. And so I wasn't really paying much attention until we were on a call with our trade association where we were going through them and somebody brought this up. So I'll just read it here. So adult use licensees, so meaning folks like us, are prohibited from contracting or subcontracting with a person or entity performing any function or activity directly involving the licensed activities authorized for that license type, including but not limited to cultivating, processing, manufacturing, distributing, or selling cannabis or cannabis products. So what this means is if you have a license to grow, you can't outsource that growing operation to somebody else. They're essentially saying you have to do that yourself.
Yep.
If you're going to be a processor, you can't outsource the processing capabilities to somebody else. You can't contract with them, which, I've heard they don't like these big master service agreements, that people come in. And I can see why they put this in here. Is I think what they're most scared of is some huge MSO comes in, multi-state operator, who knows how to grow, and they just go farm to farm to farm. They say, hey, we'll take over all of your operations for you, and we'll do it as a percentage cut of the outcome. We'll give you a little bit of money, but we'll take care of everything for you. And all of a sudden, this MSO, who the state didn't want in here, now is running all the farms.
Which, just FYI, there are 3 of them currently, MSOs that are buying hemp product and putting their name on it. So
yep,
the fear that
hemp or cannabis,
or
both.
Yeah. I mean, I say hemp because only the hemp people could get the provisional license.
Got it. So once again, so that's the worst case. Is a big multi-state operator comes in and contracts, with these master service agreements with all these growers or processors to do all the work for them and basically cuts them out.
Yeah. So they don't even need a license, right?
Yeah. They wouldn't need a license for any of it. But let's take a much, more likely situation. We've got, friends in this industry that it's just them.
Yeah. One man show.
They're doing it all themselves. They're doing, if they have a license for an acre, they may only do 1/10 of an acre or 20th of an acre, but it's still only them. And they bring in a crew to help them during harvest, cut down the plants, whole plant hang them, or maybe a trimming crew to come in. Cause as we all know, trimming is crazy tedious, takes a long time, a lot of people, and just one person can't do it. Are they not going to allow that?
Now, there could be an opportunity. This is something that this would be a major change because it opens up new licensing potential.
It does.
Meaning, could you get a license to be a contract trim crew? Something that they didn't consider. And I imagine that might be really beneficial, especially if we talk about the micro level.
Josh, we're already got them up to 1,000 pages with all the changes that we wanted to make. How many more pages?
Well, it'd be a lot more, right? Because you'd be opening up new tiers based on each of those activities that you'd be contracting out, correct?
Well, and we're seeing this right now. What we believe is happening is that brands are going to be responsible for getting a processor's license, even if they're white labeling it through somebody else. And that's another example of kind of a specialized.
So is that a contract?
It sort of is, but they're forcing them to get a license because now when you apply for a license, you got to submit a ton of documentation. Yeah. So you're right. It may be one of those where they say, hey, trimming crews, we're okay with that, but you need to get let's say a processing license or a smaller cultivation license so we can track who you have interest in.
It'd be light processing license, right? Because we lose that ability at June for the provisional.
That's true.
To be able to do that, right? So that could be just added on as another subset of the processing license, right? Because how many subsets were there? There was four. Do you have that now where you could list those for everybody? One was infusing.
It's in the tiers section here. Extraction, blending and infusing, packaging and labeling, and then branding, including for the exclusive performance of white labeling agreements. Now you can get all four,
right?
Or you can get 1 out of 4 or 2 out of 4. They've got it sort of prepackaged, but those are the 4 types of processors licenses. So you could see a fifth one of light
harvesting.
Yeah. Light processing for a farm.
Because here's the other thing. Some of these smaller ones don't maybe have the infrastructure. So in the hemp world, we saw companies that just maybe had a drying facility where we could take our product to them. They would dry it for us for a fee and then return it to us. Not saying that people want to go down that road, but that could be another opening that is now closed based on the rules currently.
Yeah. And then, there's another angle to this too, does this preclude us if we were to get a, processing license because we want to do some light solventless processing, and our, like the real processing, ethanol processing, making gummies, making, vape cartridges, which is a lot of money to buy all that equipment and get that set up and have the people be GMP certified, the HACCP training, all that stuff. Could we contract that out to another licensed processor?
Yeah. Why wouldn't you be able to?
So that's prohibited from contracting or subcontracting with a person entity performing any function directly involving the licensed activities. We are licensed to be processors. We are now contracting with another processor to make
with a license.
With a license.
Yeah.
Now, I would read that to say that we could.
It's non-licensed contractors that we couldn't.
Well, that's the language I would like to see here. Adult use licensees are prohibited from contracting or subcontracting with a non-licensed person or entity performing any function. Just that small change in wordings would give us a little bit more clarity into that. Hey, we can work with other processors where they can do what they're good at. We can do what we're good at. And then we can share resources where we need to. Though, once again, I may be a little greedy here, for that one-man show, which luckily we are not, and we can handle all of our, cultivation duties. But for that one person shop, that addition of non-license doesn't help them.
No,
they still are in a spot where they've got to do this work themselves or not do it at all. In those cases that the OCM doesn't add in another sort of processing license.
Yeah, it'd be light processing, almost like the thing we're going to lose in June 30th, right? To be able to do the packaged pre-rolls.
Yeah.
But if you look under the definition, it's really like heat and other things being used to extract. That gives that definition.
I think we've covered pretty much everything that we have some interest in.
I mean, as just shy of an hour, not bad for 7 topics out of the.
Well, and as we pointed out, this is kind of an insider's look and is probably boring to 90% of our audience because they're not doing it. But hopefully they have a new appreciation for what all these cultivators are going through and what, frankly, you talk about, geez, why is cannabis or weed so much more expensive in a dispensary versus the black market?
Tell them, Lee. Tell them why.
Here's the reason. The thickness of this book is a huge reason.
Collecting tax is another one on those.
The testing requirements, which is good.
Yep. We were looking, we were going around shopping for biomass, and we talked to a guy that had over 25 different strains. We did the calculation on that because each strain is technically would be a batch that we'd have to do a full COA, full panel test on to bring it to market. We totaled that up. It was going to cost him $30,000 to bring those 25 strains to market, not including the production cost to make whatever the hell you're making, out of it, whether it's flour, pre-roll, whatever. But that's insane.
Yeah. So,
that's my big question too, moving beyond this for the small guy, the micros that, under the limitations of canopy, let's say a 6,000 cap, how many products do you think you can make out of that? You're not going to have a whole lineup of SKUs, which is not going to be good for that micro. I mean, like, you're not going to go to, I don't know, maybe you are. I guess is it just flour really for the most part? You're never going to have the gummies or the drinks and all the other stuff with that, because it's just going to cost you an arm. And not only that, but being vertically integrated is great to some degree if it makes financial sense that you can have enough products and SKUs to make, but all the regulation is on you at that point.
Yeah.
You have cultivation, you have processing regulation, you have distribution regulation. We could barely do one.
And we've got a nice team.
As a team of people trying to figure this out.
A micro license at its current size is probably made for a team of 3, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe 3.
Right.
And the amount of work that goes into all these regulatory requirements is not a 3-man team when you also have to grow, dry, and
and just keep track of all the records of all that. Because really, I mean, this is where we had a nice benefit for us, because the way the state is saying, we can't call it organic because it's still not a federally decrimmed product. So for the USDA, we can't call it organic, but it's organic principles.
Yeah.
And really, to call it organic is another regulatory thing. It's more record keeping of us doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. So we've had that nice advantage of already knowing how to do that ahead of time, because we had to do it for our food stuff.
Yep.
Somebody coming in, starting off on a non-organic, now that has to put that burden on you on top of all the other stuff. Holy crap. It's not easy.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of extra stuff that just
for a small farmer, your regulations should be almost zero. Go out and grow. You're going to wholesale it to as biomass to an ethanol processor who's going to remove all the contaminants, remove most of the junk from it, so it's nice and clean. That's it. Go grow, give it to a processor.
My biggest worry too is like the farmers forever have been, we pay stuff wholesale and we buy everything retail. You know what I mean? And so it's like farmers are constantly getting the shaft. Yeah. If we have any hope in any industry that grows stuff and farms, you got to take some of that out, because it's hard enough as it is, especially dealing with Mother Nature the way it is in upstate New York is not easy. And we've had 2 completely different seasons back to back.
Yep.
It's not easy. And, we need to make it a little bit easier for the farms to be able to be in business and continue this. Yep. We not saying it needs to be a free for all. I duly note that we need some regulation, 110%. But our hope is that we can say our piece, somebody hears it, and thinks about it maybe in a little bit different way.
Yep.
I know we're not the only ones voicing our opinion. We've left out a lot of our gripes because we know other people are going to, have the different opinions than us. So, and I know a lot of people are talking to the board, and they each have their own agenda in this.
But the good part is the state is required to essentially respond to every question. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't group similar questions together, whatever, but they are required to read and respond to every question. So for those that are listening, definitely highly encourage, send in your unique situation, your unique question.
And really, this is for people who, if you are interested in looking or getting into this, this is kind of like us saying, hey, look, dive into this freaking book because you need to know it. For one, right? The more you can understand it and not have to pay a lawyer to tell you what it is, because more often than not, you probably know more than the lawyer does when it pertains to some of this stuff, not all of it. But we kind of want to just give you an inside look at some of the hardships that we're going through with some of this and the challenging landscape that we have. But we are, again, not to put anybody down, we are very hopeful. There's the OCM, despite the challenges of starting this, I think it has really good intentions. I do think that in a lot of ways that this has a really good chance versus other models. But how do we go through what they said and it become reality? And it's another thing to say something. It's another to execute something too, and making sure that it makes sense.
Yeah. And I would just say that, the reason we're doing some of these exercises here of going through this is to help educate, our listeners and people who are interested in this topic, because our stated goal or company principle is more, not less when it comes to the cannabis industry. And so if you are interested in getting this industry and you don't know these regs inside and out, you don't spend a lot of time reading them and answering your own questions, you're not ready for this. And we would like to help. We'd like to see you get ready.
Yes, because we have gone around and we've listened to a lot of people talk. And we see some of the questions that are coming up and just the overall public understanding of what's happening here. There's a lot of miscommunication, not people understanding what exactly is going on. And that is a challenge. That creates even more complexity to something that doesn't need to be as close. We're an open book, probably almost too much to some degree, but we want people to have success. My biggest worry is like, I don't want to set someone up for failure in this, because that really is going to hurt the industry more than help it. And again, there's plenty enough space for people in this industry to do well, and hopefully to have a successful business. But we do know people will fail. And typically those people that will fail probably didn't do as much homework into this, so they don't understand the ramifications and the decision-making that needs to happen. And we'll probably get into this on a later podcast because of DASNY and some things that have slowed that progress up. But again, we're hopeful, but we want questions answered. We want to close loopholes. We want to make it transparent. So when people read this, they're like, oh, I understand it. It makes sense. And then I'm not going to do something that's going to lead me to lose my license in the future. Right. I mean, we are extra cautious in everything that we do. We want to make sure that we're doing it by the book, and because we don't want to, get kicked out for something stupid,
And just as a pitch to those that are listening and are interested and want to learn more, highly suggest checking out our trade association, CANI, which is the Cannabis Association in New York. They got lots of members. They're super active. I think it's every territory in New York State has a local chapter of Canny that most of them, I believe, meet monthly. We're in the Onondaga County, Central New York one. First Wednesday of every month is normally when we have our meetings. Definitely check them out. I think it's canny.org or something like that, but check them out. They are great. They'll help you through a lot of this. You can ask questions, become a member, but their open meetings are open. They are not closed to just members. So even if you're just interested in
finding out more,
I want to be a dispensary owner. I want to do a small indoor grow. You want to be around like-minded people. You should be coming to these meetings.
And last but not least, I'd like to point out, we also do an educational series at Taproot Fields with Rooted New York, Aaron Field, who's got an amazing expertise in living soil growing, Korean natural farming. This Saturday from 2 to 5, we have our community mastermind. It's our third class where we're really going to cover regenerative principles and all the other stuff that we covered in classes 1 and 2, but really want to talk to the community who does come and really focus on their needs and what they're doing at home. How do we transition to conventional farming into more of a sustainable farming practices? So that's an awesome thing. And that's this Saturday at Taproot Fields, 4272 Jordan Road. January 28th from 2 to 5. Always awesome to have that and learn from other people who are doing stuff in this industry. And
if you're listening to this after that date, which most of you will be, highly recommend if you like our page on Facebook or Instagram, just Taproot Fields. We post all that stuff there, and you can see that, and it's great. It's another free class, right?
Yep.
We don't charge any money for it.
Nope.
And you don't need to be a cannabis farmer, right?
No, this is growing anything, home gardening, to market gardening, to full on, you're a dairy farmer, and want to make a transition,
regenerative type principles,
cover crops and no-till. So, which has been great. We've had a lot of people come out for that, which has been awesome. Feedback's been great about it. So, stay with us. We'll talk about this probably again. February 13th is the 60-day comment period ends. We'll see. We'll probably check back up if anything changes. And follow. There's a lot of other good organizations out there that might be covering different topics. The cord licensing. There's a lot of information out there, but really, if you have an interest, dive deep into this, do the work. And as stressful as it is, even for us doing the work and diving in, it's huge you got to do the work.
Hit us up on social. I'll send you our nice readable copy of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So
send us a note and I'll be happy to email you a PDF version.
Well, thanks everyone. I appreciate the time, and we'll see you next time. Ciao.